Hey, today I'm going to talk about the Game Boy, my first true portable video game system. And I got the Game Boy after I got the NES, so it was really cool to be able to play this portably and have the NES at the same time. I remember I was playing the NES and then I found out that this thing came out and I was really excited. I was like, this is so cool, but I didn't realize how cool it was until I actually bought one and started playing it. And I was like, damn, so this is like portable gaming. I mean, of course the graphics weren't quite as good as the NES, and the sound wasn't as good and stuff like that, but I mean, it was still really, really amazing for what you're able to get out of one of these things. And I know there are other portables that were out at the time, but this thing really paved the way for portables because the battery life on most of the stuff that had come out was really pretty bad. But to be able to play the Game Boy, which took many, many hundreds of different cartridges, and then be able to get like 10 hours, I don't know, maybe it was like what, 5 to 10 hours of battery life on this thing, on using 4 AA batteries. I mean, that was pretty amazing at the time. And I know like a lot of other stuff, it just 8 batteries. I mean, they had like color screen, like the Atari Lynx had a color screen, and you get like an hour worth of gameplay on it before you had to charge it again. The same with the Game Gear. So it wasn't really truly a portable system because unless you wanted to eat through batteries really fast, you had to keep it plugged in to play. So props to Nintendo for bringing this thing out. They did an amazing job, great design, classic look with the D-pad and the 2 buttons, start and select down below. You got the screen up top, volume, contrast buttons. There's even a headphone jack for if you want to listen to it with earbuds. So Nintendo did a fantastic job on this thing. And today I'm going to go over a couple of different Game Boys that I have, and also I'm going to go over all my games. I have a bunch of games, like I want to say maybe 50 of them. So let's take a look. But before I get into my games, I just want to say that I also have a Game Boy Color, and this one is actually modded so that it lights up, and there's like a front lit or backlit screen. I don't know what it's called, but all I know is it makes it a lot easier to play this thing in both definitely in the nighttime, also in the daytime a little bit too. The other Game Boy I have is the Game Boy Color. It's a little bit dusty, but this is a really cool addition to my collection. I remember when I got the Game Boy Color, it was like the late 90s, and honestly I wasn't that impressed with it because I was expecting more of an upgrade. I know this isn't really a true upgraded system. I guess the Game Boy Advance is more something like that, but you know, it's just basically taking regular Game Boy games and just kind of giving them a teeny bit more power and then also making them colorful. And making them colorful was important, but without that backlight or front light, or like I guess you had to use a warm light back then, it was just still really hard to play these things. So what's the point of having color if you still can't really see it? But it was still a cool addition, and I'm glad I have one in my collection. Now to get to my games, and I just counted, I have about 55 Game Boy Color and Game Boy games. And let's go over what I have. So first let's start with a couple of really classic games. I got the Pokemon Gold version. You know Pokemon, I'm sure. And then I also have Pokemon Blue version. I don't have the red one, but I know the blue and the red are very similar to each other. I have Kirby's Dream Land, which is a really fun platformer game on the Game Boy. Kirby's Pinball Land, which is a great pinball game, one of my favorite pinball games of all time. And then I have Alleyway, which is kind of like a Breakout Arkanoid type clone, but it has Mario. You can see like Mario's that little character right there. He's the one who controls your paddle, and I think I got this game like right when I got my Game Boy, and it's actually a pretty fun game. I still pop it in every once in a while and play it. Kirby Star Stacker is a fun puzzle game with Kirby. I know you know I'm a big Kirby fan. I have Donkey Kong, which is not just regular Donkey Kong. This has a lot more features than regular Donkey Kong. There's levels and stuff you can go through. It's actually a really good game. Oh, and it's Super Game Boy compatible too. Kirby's Block Ball, which is also kind of like Alleyway, another Breakout type game with Kirby. Double Dragon. I mean, if you have it on the NES, you want to play it on the go, you got to get it on the Game Boy, right? Super Mario Land 2, which is, I don't know, I like the first one a lot. I also like the second one. I think they're about equal in my book, but this one is really good. Super Mario Land 2. Space Invaders. I don't even know why I have this game. I guess it's kind of fun. Double Dragon 2, another fun port from the NES, of course. Downgraded graphics and gameplay, but still fun. Motocross Maniacs, I remember when this game came out. It's a really fun game. You should check this out. It's kind of like a Excitebike game, but it's 2D and there's like a lot of loops and stuff you can go through. So it's a pretty cool game. Baseball, it's just a classic game. It's not the best baseball game, but it has like Mario on the cover, and it was one of the early Game Boy games, so I have it in my collection. Dr. Mario, classic puzzle game that was on the NES. Then they decided to port it over to the Game Boy, and it's just as fun. It's a little bit harder to play because you don't have the colors like you get on the NES, but it's still fun. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan. And if you love the Ninja Turtles, you have to have a game on the Game Boy for Ninja Turtles. This one's pretty cool. Solar Striker is actually a really underrated game. You should check this out if you haven't already played it. It's kind of like a space shooter, but it's on the Game Boy. And of course, it's in black and white because it's on Game Boy. But they're able to accomplish a lot with this game. And it's really, I was actually playing it early this morning, and it's really impressive what they're able to do. Pretty cool game. It's kind of like a Gradius for the Game Boy. Lock and Chase is another game that not a lot of people have heard of, but it's a fun puzzle game. Check it out if you like puzzle games. DuckTales. I mean, it's not as good as the NES game, of course, but it's still fun to play on the go. Disney DuckTales. Pretty cool game. F1 Race is a surprisingly good game. It's really basic, but if you like racing, it's fun. It kind of reminds me of Rad Racer in a way. The tracks aren't quite as complex as a game like Rad Racer. They're really kind of basic, but it's still a pretty cool game. I think that's a 4-player game too. There's not too many 4-player Game Boy games, but that is one. Quarth is actually another game that it's like a puzzle game. It's kind of like Breakout, but it's kind of like Tetris in a way. You shoot these blocks up, and then you have to like match the different designs, and then they disappear, and you go further along. It's fun if you like puzzle games. Kid Icarus is a Game Boy game that I have, and again, not as good as the NES game, but it's still pretty cool. Game & Watch Gallery, and this is the original one. I think I have a few of them. And if you like Game & Watches like I do, I have like 4 in my collection. I have a whole nother video about that. You should check out these Game & Watch Gallery games because they're like 4 mini games in one. And the games are surprisingly fun. They're kind of like, there's 2 versions of it. There's one classic, which looks just like the old Game & Watch. Then there's one with updated graphics for the Game Boy. Tiny Toon Adventures, another underrated game. The NES game is awesome. The Game Boy game is awesome as well. Tiny Toon Adventures, Bab's Big Break. Quicks, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's not Kicks, it's Quicks. It's not like the cereal. My friend introduced me to this in the 80s. I think he had it on his NES, and I loved it. It's basically a cool puzzle game where you make blocks and you try to like block off these bad things on the screen, and then like when you get like over 75% of it blocked off, you move on to the next level, and it's really addicting. Kirby's Dream Land 2. The first one was so good that they made a sequel, and this one has different characters that you can ride along with, and that makes it even cooler. Miss Pac-Man, I mean, you gotta have a Miss Pac-Man. Everyone loves Pac-Man, everyone loves Miss Pac-Man. It's a pretty good game on the Game Boy. I think you might have to scroll on this game though, so it's not quite as good as the NES version, but it's still good. Castlevania Adventure. This game moves kind of slow, especially compared to the NES version, but I mean, it's Castlevania. It's awesome, so pretty cool game. Tracks. This is a kind of fun game. I haven't spent too much time with it, but I remember looking it up online and finding out about it, and I was like, all right, I got to get that game in my collection, and I'm glad I did. It's a little bit hard to control because of the way the controls are set up, but it's still pretty cool. Revenge of the Gator. Well, I like pinball, and this is probably my second favorite pinball game, definitely on the Game Boy, behind Kirby's pinball game. But this game is almost as good. It's really fun. Kirby's Tilt and Tumble is a game that I own because it's an awesome cartridge. Look at that pink cartridge. But honestly, I don't really like this game that much. It's really hard to control using the Game Boy Color. You have to tilt it, and it's difficult to play, but I still have it. All right, here's Tetris, probably my most played Game Boy game of all time. I mean, this game came with the Game Boy, and it's a big reason why the Game Boy was so successful. I think this was packed in with like all the Game Boys when they first came out, and this got people hooked on their Game Boy. I remember my cousins had it, everyone, all my friends had it. I mean, it's just so addicting. Super Mario Land. This is another one of my early release Game Boy games. Probably one of my first Game Boy games that I have along with Tetris. Fun game. Tetris Plus is a fun game that is similar to the original Tetris game, but it has a few new features. It's still not as good as the original Tetris game, just because that game's a classic, but it's still pretty cool if you like other types of if you like other different ways to play Tetris. Check it out. Wario Blast is kind of like a Bomberman game, but it features Wario. If you like Bomberman, check out Wario Blast. Wave Race is another game that is underrated on the Game Boy. I mean, you know you've played it on the N64, and it's great on the N64, but the Game Boy game is also very good, considering how limited the Game Boy how limited the power of the Game Boy is, and the graphics and the sound. They made it work with this game, Wave Race. Tennis is one of my first Game Boy games that I've ever owned, back in the early 90s, and it's addicting. It's awesome. It's well designed. I mean, it's really basic. There's only like one play. You can't even like choose your player. It's not like Mario Tennis or anything like that, but the mechanics of the game work really well, and it's a fun game. Mega Man. You can't have a Game Boy not have at least one Mega Man game, so this is the one I have. This is Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge. I didn't even realize which one I have, but it's cool. I mean, it's not as good as the NES games again, but it's fun. Golf is another early Game Boy game that I've had since since the early 90s, and it's fun. It's not as fun as some of the later games that they made for Game Boy, but some of the later Game Boy golf games that they made, but it's still good. Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. It took me a second to realize that. So this is Super Mario Land 3. They just call it Wario Land, and it's almost as good as the first two Super Mario Lands, but not quite as good. But definitely check it out if you like platformers or if you like Wario. Tetris Attack. I believe this is a game that is not really like Tetris. This game is a little bit different. You have to match the colors. You can see you match the colors and then they disappear. The rows disappear. But it's still fun if you like puzzle games. I'll just do all three of these at once. I have all three Donkey Kong lands because they're really good games. And not a lot of people know that a lot of people are used to playing Donkey Kong Country on the Super NES, but Donkey Kong Lands 1, 2, and 3 on the Game Boy is almost as fun as Donkey Kong Country. So definitely check those out if you like Donkey Kong Country and you've never played Donkey Kong Land yet. So now I'm going to get into a few more games that I have, and these are my black Game Boy games. I believe these are games that were designed for the Game Boy Color, but they also worked on the regular Game Boy. This is kind of during the transition period between the two. So I have Game & Watch Gallery 2, and I have Game & Watch Gallery 3 for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. I have Tetris DX, which is kind of like the original Tetris for Game Boy, but it has color now. I think there might be a few other modes or something. I don't know. Can't remember if they added anything else to that. I have Link's Awakening DX, which is just like the one on the Game Boy, but it's in color now. And I think they might have added like an extra dungeon or something. And now I'm going to get into my Game Boy Color only games. So I have Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, which is basically Super Mario Bros. 1 on your Game Boy Color. And when this game first came out, I was loving it because I really wanted to play this game on my Game Boy. I loved the original Super Mario Bros. So I was happy that they brought this out. It also has a lot of extra little features too. It's not just the regular first Game Boy. It has a bunch of extra stuff. Mario Golf, which is a lot better than the regular Golf for Game Boy. You could choose your players. It has more courses. It's easier to hit the ball and customize your shot and stuff like that. Magical Tetris Challenge, another fun puzzle game. A lot of different Tetris games in this Game Boy Color game. And then I have Mario Tennis, which, like Mario Golf, it takes tennis to the next level on the Game Boy Color with a lot more options. I just want to show you guys my Game Boy collection. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.